Good morning, everyone.
We all are. Yeah, that's right.
You might eventually have to squeeze up because we've kind of done a bit of a strategy, a tactic, let's say, that the chairs are numbered according to how many delegates we'll have, so there's more people coming in, which means you all have to connect with each other as well, which is part of what the event is supposed to do. So then introduce each other and do find out where you're from, why you're here, and hopefully there's going to be a bit of a legacy of these kinds of connections. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marcus Ford. I'm one of the professors here in the School of Design, and I also work on behalf of QUT and the QUT More-than-Human Research Group. I'll play a little video in order to welcome you on behalf of our, I should now say, former elder in residence, and I will then say a few words around the acknowledgement.
Welcoming the language of the Yagara people. We acknowledge the Turrbal and Yagara peoples as the First Nation owners of the lands of where QUT now stands. For thousands of years, the Turrbal and Yagara people have gathered along the banks of the Brisbane River, to share their knowledge and stories. We pay our respects to their elders, laws, customs and creation spirits. We recognise that these lands where QUT now stands have always been places of teaching, researching and learning. We acknowledge the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play within our QUT community. From Moreton Bay inland as far as the Great Dividing Range near Warwick and Toowoomba, as far north as the Caboolture River, including the lands around Brisbane City, Meeanjin. Yura Yura Yinala, Balta Bi Balta, Nanguru Muru Maramakura Manyavirali, Manyabaya. Welcome to the traditional country of the Turrbal and Yagara people.
And I'd like to add my own acknowledgements of country and pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. These are the lands of the Yagara and the Turrbal people, both north and south of the Brisbane River. And I feel really privileged, together with a number of colleagues that I see in the audience, being part of a research group that is actually now trying to, I suppose, connect the dots between the statements that we're making in the beginning of these events and how we can actually then try and start to translate some of this into practice. So in our case, with the More-than-Human group, a lot of the work that we are doing is to try and learn and try and interpret the kinds of teachings from Indigenous research, for instance, around the kinds of cosmologies and epistemologies. And 2 days ago at the opening of the Green Institute conference, we heard from Dr. Mary Graham and Dr. Michelle Maloney, who talked about how, for instance, relationalism and how a relational ethos can be applied to cities, to city design, city governance, city planning. And so this is one of the examples that we are trying to shepherd and lead in the More-than-Human group. And so this is one of the themes for today as well. Whilst each panel that is you've seen in the program will have a very local and very, I suppose, practical and activist focus, there is also an overarching theme around the More-than-Human, which has to do with post-anthropocentric and perhaps even a post-capital-centric view of the world moving forward. And so part of what we are trying to hold today is to make connections. I already mentioned the connections amongst each other, but there's also the connections between these more conceptual, theoretical ideas and what's happening on the ground, the grassroots, and how there is actually very direct touch points that we can explore. And I'm hoping that our panelists will draw out some of these touch points. The other touch point is also between those groups and the kinds of issues that are being discussed, because whilst I think I can say we're all very passionate about these local issues, there's also a need for us to form alliances. And so you will hear later on from Chris Walker and other members of the South East Queensland Community Alliance, and that will be important for us to move forward and maybe have as a legacy from this event ways that we can strengthen the existing alliances, join both Brisbane Residents United as well as the South East Queensland Community Alliance, and see what we can do together beyond the immediate issues at stake. The other part that I might just preface with today's event is that it's entirely self-indulgent for me, because the kind of benefit and pleasure of being the event chair is that I was able to just sit together and create my own smorgasbord of very yummy speakers and ideas and panelists. And so I'm so pleased that so many of you, in fact all the ones that you see there, have responded to my call and me twisting their arms to be part of this event even today on a Sunday, and for some of you even already after 2 full-on days at the Green Institute, and Tim's here as well to talk a little bit more about what happened the last 2 days at the Green Institute conference. Part of this indulgence is that I hate post-it notes. I'm professor in the School of Design. We don't eat our own dog's breakfast. We don't take that kind of medicine. So there's not going to be any post-it notes, any butcher's papers, any crayons. There's not going to be any workshops. There's not going to be even any PowerPoints. I had to fight very hard with a certain gentleman there at the back who was wrestling me to put his USB stick into the computer, and I was able to prevent that from happening. So the entire event is conversational, oral. It's about storytelling. It's about sharing of experiences. I haven't even done a PowerPoint. You can see I'm just showing you the website there. And I'm just going to scroll through the website throughout the day to move along in the program. That's it. Part of that is, as I said, is focus on the conversational aspects. And the other part to it is also that the program is actually quite luxurious in terms of its schedule and timing. Usually conferences are very, very packed. There's multiple screens, you only got 5 minutes. This one is very different. Both the panels as well as the breaks are quite lengthy in essence, right? So we have full hours for each panel. We have half hours for morning and afternoon tea, and we have a full hour for lunch. It's all designed to get you comfortable. It's a kind of slow food equivalent experience, so it's a slow event on purpose. Although I believe that once we get into these discussions, it will actually, the day will be over really, really quickly. But it's still hopefully designed to make you relax and still enjoy the kind of Sunday experience today, but also be able to engage. So the panels will introduce the topic and obviously the panelists, and then there will be discussion amongst panelists, but there's about half allocated then to audience interactions, and we've got microphones that can roll around. Please do wait for the microphone to come to you, because we are recording the event. If there's any section or overall where you don't feel comfortable for anything that you say being recorded, so the camera, for instance, is only going to show the panelists, but if there's, for instance, a question that you don't want to be part of the recording, just come up to me and we can edit this out. But just to make it easier, we'll just let it run, and there's no other online audience, so it's at the moment just a Zoom thing that is recording into my account. But yeah, do let me know if there's any kind of, oh, I shouldn't have said this, or I shouldn't have mentioned this person. We can edit this out, and then hopefully we can have some of these proceedings published on our website as a video. In terms of housekeeping, I've opened up the balcony. Please don't jump down. It's going to cause a lot of occupational health and safety paperwork for me. It is a very nice view out there, but it can get quite windy, and it's also the sun will eventually come around. But once we have morning, afternoon tea, lunch, and so forth, please enjoy the balcony there. Catering will be set up out there. If you do need to use facilities, you actually have to exit the function space and you go back to the elevators and the powder rooms on the left and on the right. It's probably the most expensive real estate for bathrooms because those are actually the spaces that have the best city view. So I encourage you to, look up where you are at the facilities. There's two more colleagues I'd like to welcome to the stage for this introduction. My first colleague is Jen C, who's an associate professor in the School of Design as well, and one of the founding members of the More-than-Human group, and at the moment the team leader, co-leader, I'd say, with a bunch of us who's looking after the group, and Jen will say a few words about what's the More-than-Human group and its purpose and aims. Please make Jen feel welcome.
Thank you, Marcus. What a great day, and it's a beautiful day it's turned out to be. I'm one of the co-leads, along with Marcus and Jane, for the More-than-Human Futures research group at QUT, and we are a group of interdisciplinary researchers, creative practitioners, designers, architects, people from across the faculty and the university. And what we're really trying to do is, as Marcus also said just then, address the unfolding planetary ecocide. So we have a moral imperative to do something about the direction the world is going now, and how can we address this with our academic understandings and with engaging with the public in lots of different ways. So whether it is questions of engaging with children or with the general public or with scientists, with established processes in government or in design to involve various stakeholders. We would advocate for things like, well, you're engaged with stakeholders to design things like Victoria Park and redesign Victoria Park in the Barrambin area, which is our first panel today. And you're going to engage with community, and you're going to engage with council and industry and with the golf course and all these different people. But what about the animals? What about Indigenous perspectives? And not just putting those voices at the table, and we know that's actually a very current and very relevant issue right now. We're trying to bring voices to the table for Indigenous perspectives. But also, how can we do this in a thoughtful way? How can we do it properly? So beyond sort of tokenistic mechanisms as well. So, and those sorts of engagement issues and bringing those values to the fore in a way that actually does make a difference. So it's about the methods, it's about whether or not it can actually work, and it's about what is the issue here and understanding it in a broader sense as well and in a broader context, which is to take into account the world around us, which quite literally is burning and flooding, right? So we do have a lot of imperative again. So that's our group. We are practitioners, we are makers, we are researchers, we write, we are scientists, we are students. And we are delighted to be able to reach out to you all here today and have your voices as well. And thank you, Marcus. I think you wanted to hand over to our next guest.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. And I'll quickly introduce Tim. Tim Hollow is joining us here today. He's, I think, a little bit exhausted, to be gentle with him, after having chaired as well as organised the 2-day Green Institute conference across the river at Griffith University. Tim is also the executive director of the Green Institute, and in essence, I would just say a powerhouse behind all the activities in terms of the research, publications, the event, the activation of progressive thought leadership in the country. And he's an author. Living Democracies is a recent book, and maybe you can say a few words about that as well. But tell us a little bit about the Green Institute and how the conference went.
Thanks so much, Marcus, for the kind introduction and the kind invitation. And your comments about the self-indulgent event, I feel incredibly privileged to have been able to be quite self-indulgent as well with the event that we just put on for the last 2 days and gathering some really exciting things. But as a brief introduction, I am the Executive Director of the Green Institute, which is the official think tank for the Australian Greens Party nationally. It is of and for the Greens Party, but it is much more than that. What we're seeking to do is create spaces for conversations around not just the party as an electoral body and as an organising body, but as a space for transformative ecological politics is vision. So it's really, people often think of political think tanks, I guess, as sort of policy development spaces and things like that. That's not really relevant, in fact, for the Australian Greens, because as a Greens party, which is deeply committed to grassroots engagement, our policy is developed by our members. Our policy documents are developed by our members all the time and rejigged by our members. So the think tank then is really about creating space for bigger conversations. It's about creating space for connections and stretching our thoughts and thinking, and the value of thinking together in its own right and what that brings us. We consider our vision statement, I guess, I hate that kind of sort of terminology, but we did a lot of thinking recently about what it is that we should be saying we're doing, and we say we are leading, seeding and feeding transformative green politics. And I guess that feeds into what Jen was just saying as well then, in terms of where we're standing today and what we're trying to do in our various activities in the community and in mobilising and organising and creating change, is that I think we should always have been thinking in transformative terms, and many of us do, but at this time in history right now, it is absolutely incumbent on us to do so, because the world is burning, literally. And we know that all of these things, the housing crisis, the housing affordability crisis, the ongoing dispossession and genocide of First Nations people of this continent, the climate crisis, the extinction crisis, the social crisis, the mental health and physical health crisis, all of this that's going on around us. This, as I said at the opening of our conference 2 days ago, this isn't some kind of unfortunate coincidence that all these things are happening at the same time. It's fundamentally connected and it's fundamentally systemic. These crises are all being driven by the system, the political economic system of capitalism, colonialism, patriarchy, and what I refer to in my book, Living Democracy, an Ecological Manifesto for the End of the World as We Know It, what I refer to as an anti-ecological system. And I guess that's what I want to kind of briefly talk about now, is that this system that we have goes against the laws of nature, essentially. Ecology is all about interdependence, diversity, and constant change. And our system is based on separation and domination and this illusion of balance. And we've got to get through that. And so that's what the conference over the last 2 days was about. I call it the City Transformed, Urban Life at the End of the World as We Know It. And getting us to think about what would it look like to be living into being cities, urban spaces, where 70% of Australians already live in urban spaces of 100,000 or more. What would it look like to live into being cities that have transformed into spaces where we can live sustainably, equitably, happily together? Not just us as humans, but with the more than human world And so we were digging into this idea from all sorts of directions. As Marcus said, we started with the wonderful Auntie Mary Graham and Michelle Maloney, helping us to think about a relational ethos that Indigenous worldviews and cosmologies and political philosophy really is based on since time immemorial, and that our culture has rejected. And we worked through all sorts of ideas of how transport systems can not just be transformed, but how transforming those transport systems can transform us. It can transform our communities in different ways. And how thinking about development in the city to make cities more affordable and more livable can transform us and can transform our relationships with each other and with the more than human world. And so, yeah, I guess what I wanted to say to introduce this session is, this conference over the last couple of days was looking at it from kind of overarching systemic perspectives, and this is coming at it from the direction of a bunch of grassroots, really important, specific campaigns, and that's a fantastic juxtaposition. And yeah, what I would ask you to think about, which I know is what Marcus and Jen and others are asking you to think about too, is, I guess, if I tweak not just alliances, but also synergies, and how what you're trying to do in each of your particular cases is and can be part of systemic change. Because if I have a critique of so much of the change making that we tend to do in our society, it's that it tends to be very siloed. And we tend to end up being quite competitive for good reason, because that's what our culture tells us we need to do. That's what our economic system insists that we have to do. We're always competing for attention of our community members to get them to sign on to our campaign, competing for attention for money, for philanthropic dollars, competing for the attention of the decision makers, the power holders who are going to make the decisions on these particular fights and struggles that we're engaged in. And it's that competition, that separation, siloing of our work and the competition between them that I think we really need to work out how not to do, and reimagine our work together, not just as alliances, to build alliances between our work, but to build the synergies that make all of them transformative. So as we're working on this particular site, geographic site, or this particular site of contestation, we're seeing how each of these struggles merge together through solidarity and through understanding that they are all part of the same struggle to live into being an ecological world, an ecological city that is healthy and happy and equitable for all of us and the more than human world. I guess there were a few things that I just wanted to briefly pick out, lessons from the last couple of days, a few things that came up for me. One is, as Marcus and I have already mentioned, that relationality, that relational ethos of understanding that we are all connected and must all connect to each other, and more than human as well. Another, which relates to what I was just saying as well, is this idea of multipolarity. So that instead of seeing ourselves as siloed and working in those ways, and instead of trying to centralise our work under one big umbrella, we're understanding it as multipolar. There are these different sites of contestation within a much bigger struggle. And the third, I guess, which really beautiful point that Marcus was making about a slow conversation. One of the really clear messages that came through over the last couple of days that I picked up on was this idea that we really need to hurry up and slow down. That our struggle is unbelievably urgent, but our task is a slow one. And we have to learn to grapple with that contradiction in what we're doing. Understand the urgency of this struggle and work out how to do it slowly. So thanks very much. I look forward to the next few hours.